Welcome back. Now, in this step, let's focus on the front end. Let's see what's happening on the front end since we enabled basic authentication. We added Spring Security in the backend and it's securing our RESTful services. So we are not really sending any security information along with our RESTful services. I've logged in, I'm on the welcome page. I've cleared the console out. I did a right click inspect and cleared the console out. And let's clear it again and click get welcome message. You can see that I'm getting an error. It says access to XML HTTP request is blocked by CORS policy. Because we did not supply the basic authentication details along with our request, we might be getting some error. Let's first address that and let's see the details of the error a little later. But until later, I'll copy this error and have a backup of this specific error message. What I'll do is I'll go to the welcome data service and I'll just paste a copy of this message down there. So access to this. What we want to do is along with the request, we would want to send the basic authentication headers. Just like we sent the basic authentication headers while we were using the RESTlet client, we can send them along with the execution of the request from the front end code as well. I'm in the welcome data service and we are in the execute hello world service with path variable. That's the method which is invoked finally in the data service when we click get welcome message. And what we want to do is let's focus on this and add a few headers in here. If you press comma here, you'd see that I can send a list of headers as part of the options of the second parameter. So you can say options colon headers and that would send the headers out. So what we'll do is we'll first create a method to create the headers. So instead of writing all the code in here, what I'll do is I'll create a separate method. So I'll call it create basic HTTP header, or even better would be to say basic authentication HTTP header. For now, let's hard code everything in here. So I'll say let username is equal to, what's the username? In 28 minutes. That's the username. Let password is equal to dummy. Now I would want to create the basic authentication header. How do we create the basic authentication header? Basic auth header string. Auth header string, if we remember earlier, was something like this: basic plus username plus password. The basic auth header string typically is actually some kind of a byte 64 representation of a combination of username password appended with a string called basic. The username and password are separated by colon. And in addition to this, what I would need to do is I would need to encode this string. So whatever string which comes out of this needs to be encoded in a base 64 format. And the great thing is JavaScript already provide a way to do that. It's window.btoa. That's the function. You can see it's window base 64. So that's the encoding that this does. So your basic authentication header string is basic space plus the by 64 encoding of username plus colon plus password. Now what we would need to do is we would need to send this as part of the headers. For now, let's end this method in here. Let's return the basic auth header string from here. And what I'll do in here is I'll call the method. So I'll say let basic this string is equal to this method call. Let's add this to it. The reason why I'm creating a separate method is because we would want to reuse this method a little later. Now let's create the headers. So I'll say let headers is equal to, the way we can create headers is by using something called HTTP headers. So HTTP headers is one of the classes. It's in Angular common HTTP. So let's import that in. You would see that it's in here. So HTTP headers is imported in. And what we want to create is a HTTP header. And over here you can provide an object. So I would need to provide a open brace, close brace. And the header which you would want to send is authorization. So I'll say authorization colon the value for the authorization that we would need to send. What is the value that we would need to send for that authorization? It's this auth basic authentication string. So let's format this a little bit. So it's basically I'm creating a constructor. I'm creating an instance of the HTTP headers and passing in this specific object with authorization value populated. So we have a set of HTTP headers created with authorization. I'll call this headers. And now I would want to pass the headers out to this specific method. The way I can pass them out is inside another object. So inside another object, I'm putting in headers. It's very important that this is named as headers. If you have a different variable name in here, then it's better to put headers :headers. So this headers is a constant, and this headers represents this specific thing which we have in here. So if I'm naming this as header, then probably it should be called something like this: headers and header. So what we are setting is inside the object, we are setting an attribute called headers to this value. But I would love actually to just leave it as headers and leave something of this kind. So headers, and by default, the name of the attribute would be the name of this variable. There are a wide range of mysteries in JavaScript. And now let's see what would happen. Now if I go in, wait for the application to relaunch and click get welcome message. Now you'd see that this message is a little different from earlier one. You'd see that earlier it said no access control allow urgent is present on the requested resource. Now it says response to pre-flight request doesn't pass access control check. It does not have HTTP OK status. And if you look at actually the network tab, and let's clear everything out which is present in here before, and let's pull the screen up a little so that we can see a little bit more. You'd see that there is a new request which is being sent. If you look at the general, there is a new request method which is being used. It's called options. What is happening is, as soon as we added basic authentication, some kind of authentication to our request, before making the HTTP call, there is something called an options check which is done. And you can see that this options check is failing right now. Let's fix the options part in the next step along with something called CSRF. I'll see you in the next step. Until then, bye-bye.